This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, show number 354. We are your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, and rhetoric. I'm your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of my Star Wars Rival Run Weekends mug, brought to me by Riley Blanton, who helped me so much with my audio this week, as did Randy Therio and Aaron Adams. All three of them are amazing guys, and I could not do this without them. I want to thank them so much for their help. On today's show, Ian Doescher, the author of The Merry Rise of Skywalker, joins us to talk about his wonderful book, the end of this amazing series, and what it's like to combine William Shakespeare's language with the magic of Star Wars. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?
Joining me today for a cup of coffee is returning guest and a great friend of mine. He's a talented writer, a wonderful guy, and he is a huge Star Wars fan. That is, of course, Mr. Ian Doescher, the author of The Merry Rise of Skywalker. Ian, welcome back to Coffee with Kenobi.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me again.
You are welcome, my friend. Well, gosh, think about this. I would say, gosh, when Coffee with Kenobi started was 2013, and that's when your first book came out, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I thought so. So we've had you on, I believe, for just about every single release. And my goodness, the world has changed. We've gone through a lot of different things. We've gone through a pandemic, a lot of stuff. But one thing that is consistent, and that is the quality and the passion that you put into this book. So before I kind of ask you your first question, I just want to tell you, when I got the book from Quirk, I was reading it. My wife and I, every night we read before we go to sleep. And she was reading a book and she was laughing. And I was reading a book and I was laughing. And I was gasping and she goes, "What are you reading?" And I said, "Ian's new book." And she goes, "Oh, okay." And she knows exactly what that means. So what I love about your book is that the reason it's funny is because of how you wrote it. So kind of talk to us about this book and what made this book different from the other iterations of William Shakespeare's Star Wars.
I mean, just like with the movie, there's this sense that you're wrapping everything up. And so I was very conscious of that as I was writing. The sequel series in general has been a different writing experience from the other books because I've been writing so quickly after the movie comes out. I basically start writing within a week or so of the movie's release, and I'm trying to finish up within a matter of weeks. So I think with this one, I really wanted to get in as much as I could of what characters are thinking as this big adventure is ending, really trying to sort of give everyone their due if possible, and also just tell this story in the best way I can.
Which it certainly does. And what Shakespeare did so well is that I think his books came to life because of what he added to his characters and how realistic and fully formed they were. And what I love that you've done with this book, with all of your books, but especially with this one, is that you take Rey, you take Finn, you take Poe, even BB-8 or Chewbacca, and you add dimensions and layers to them that allows for me to really enjoy and appreciate them even more. So I appreciate that. And so kind of talk about the importance of character in these books. I mean, because it's not like you're creating these characters, but you are adding some nuance to them that I think quite honestly, is missing in the finished cinematic product for this movie. But you actually made me enjoy the story more, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think with this one, with all of the books, the privilege that I've had is to be able to give characters words and specifically speeches that aren't in the movies, where you really get a glimpse of how they're feeling about different things. So, being able to give voice to Chewbacca when after Princess Leia dies, General Leia dies, and and also I think being able to give, especially Ben Kenobi, some words after he has sort of come back to the light side, to be able to actually give him words when he's encountering Rey at the end of the movie, where, in the movie itself, I think the only word he says, basically after he turns back to the light side is "ow," and so to be able to sort of round out his arc a little more, I think, was something that I just appreciate so much, that Lucasfilm has let me do that with characters, because as a Star Wars fan, it's just so much fun to think about what are these people really feeling right now, and how can I express that? Because Shakespeare was so good at having his characters tell you, here's what's going through my head right now. Here's what I'm feeling and sensing.
Well, and I think that's important. And think about the considerable power and trust that Lucasfilm has, and that they've sort of bestowed upon you, for lack of a better word. Because, yeah, you're right. Ben Solo, at the end of this film, he doesn't say anything once he turns the light side. But you have an opportunity to flesh him out, to paint him with a much broader stroke, and add to his character. But you still have certain parameters that you have to work with. What is that like when you know, hey, I need to write some dialogue for Ben? How do I approach this? That must be very daunting.
Well, I knew early on that I was going to draw out the sort of Romeo and Juliet parallel toward the end in his final encounter with Rey, because it was a clear parallel to me. I was not alone in thinking that. Many people sort of said the same thing, and so I knew I at least wanted to talk about that. But I also wanted to get some sense of how it felt for him to be, fighting for the good guys, and the sense that he has of, I think that he has of righting the wrongs that he had done. He's sort of getting the chance to do that. That was something I was able to bring out. And you're right. I mean, Lucasfilm does give me a lot of leeway in that. And I've learned in 9 books with them that whatever I want to do, I should just try it. I should just put it on paper. And if they don't like it, they can always pull me back. But I would rather have tried the thing I wanted to do and said the thing I wanted to say, rather than not try it.
Which is actually an excellent thing that I would encourage students, or we encourage our kids, and for both parents to do. Try it, see what works, let your creative juices flow, and you do that in remarkable ways. And I mentioned at the top of the show that my gasps and my laughter when I was reading this book. So people may be wondering, well, tell me why it's funny. Well, for me, why it's funny is you use some, I don't even know the right word to use to describe it, so I'll defer that to you because you are the author. But you use different methods with Poe, for example, Poe Dameron. What you do in all of Poe's speeches, as far as I can tell, is you insert different elements from the legacy of literature that is Edgar Allan Poe. Who's obviously not, Shakespeare wasn't, it's not even the same country that they wrote, but they're both gifted writers that are famous. And I just marveled and had such joy trying to piece together Edgar Allan Poe's work through the lens of Poe Dameron. Talk to me about that, because I honestly think that was genius, Ian. I love that.
Well, thank you. When I wrote The Force Doth Awaken, we had these 3 new characters. Really 4 new characters. We had Rey and Finn and Poe and BB-8, and I wanted to do something special for all of them. And so I did come up with this convention for Poe that each one of his lines was going to somehow reference and include some snippet from Edgar Allan Poe. I will confess to you that by the end of 3 books, especially once he has such a bigger role in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, it felt like a stretch. Every time he had a bit of dialogue, I'd think, oh boy, here he goes again, because I have to find another quote. So that one was hard. It was hard work. And hopefully none of it feels too much like sort of a non sequitur. Like, why is Poe saying this? Hopefully it all sort of blends in pretty naturally. But that was the sort of thing I did to honor him. It's I think of it in the same vein as what I did with Mace Windu, where he every line of his references a Samuel L. Jackson movie.
Yes.
And again, like by the time Mace Windu died, I was so happy to see him gone because I was running out of Samuel L. Jackson movies. I couldn't use the phrase jungle fever in a a Star Wars book. So anyway.
Right. But that's a great example because there's so many different Samuel Jackson films, and there's so much Edgar Allan Poe, but Poe to many people that aren't English teachers or lovers of literature like you and I are, to me that's the genius of this, because none of them are non sequiturs. They legitimately aren't, and yes, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm also a teacher of literature, so I feel like I'm a little more discerning about that stuff. Because I remember my aunt Lori, God rest her soul, said to me, well, anything you like, you just like everything no matter what, because it's got that brand on it. But I always said, or no, actually, I feel like I'm more discerning because it's more important to me. So I look at it more with a fine-tooth comb. And again, I'm not just saying that. I mean, I've made no secret of my love for you and what a great guy you are and a great friend. But these are legitimately gifted, intelligent ways of crafting a story. Because you're not just telling a story, and a Star Wars story at that, but you're trying to find different ways to tell it, that whether if you're an Edgar Allan Poe scholar or just a fan of Star Wars, you can still enjoy it either way. Talk about kind of walking that line.
Well, yeah, I definitely never. I mean, first and foremost, the thing that I'm trying to do is tell the story or retell the story and do it in a way that's going to that people are going to enjoy. And so, if we get to the point where some convention or other that I've chosen is getting in the way of that, is actually causing problems, then I haven't done my job as an author and as a storyteller, I think. Although, I mean, even in lines where in the movie Poe might have a word or two words, I am extending that out a little bit to get in an Edgar Allan Poe reference. I'm really trying to not do it in a way that pulls people out of it who don't even know what I'm doing, right? Aren't even aware that there's an Edgar Allan Poe thing going on, because I don't want them to ruin the story for them or ruin the flow of the book for them. So I really do try to walk that line carefully between like the fun thing that I want to do and somebody's actual enjoyment of the book, no matter who they are, whether they're a person who has done their dissertation on Edgar Allan Poe, or has never read any of his stuff.
So I'm curious, how did you, like, I pictured you writing this with books all over your desk or tabs open all over your laptop of different Poe texts. Like, are you super familiar with them? Did you have to research in Google and just kind of make stuff work, or how did you kind of go about that?
I have, and you're absolutely right. Every time I sat down to write, in fact, it lived in I often am doing my writing at the kitchen table late in the evening. And so it lived next to our kitchen table for the time I was writing this book. But it's my complete works of Edgar Allan Poe. It's his full stories and poems. And it's a gigantic, 1,500 page book. Mm-hmm. And so I was basically trying to, every time a line would come up, I would try to pick from a new story or a new poem, so that I wasn't repeating too much. Now, in the end, we probably end up with a reference. We probably end up with something like 2 or 3 or 4 references to every single one of his short stories or poems.
Yeah.
The poems are actually easier, even though they're shorter, so there's fewer words to choose from. They're often also in meter, sometimes even in iambic pentameter. So that makes it even easier to include them. The short stories, often you're sort of hunting around for a phrase that might work. So so that's what I did, and then I would meticulously write down. So if you said, hey, where's this particular where's this particular line from, I would be able to look in this book that I've written in and tell you exactly which story it's from.
I sort of expected that, and I'm happy to hear that. Is there one story that you found yourself leaning on more than the others, because either you were drawn to it or just because it just works so well for Poe Dameron?
I don't think so in particular. I think I probably overused the word tintinnabulation throughout the books, because it's such a, I mean, I don't know about you, but I only associate that word with Poe's poem, The Bells. Yeah. And so I'm sure it appears at least twice, maybe more in the sequel trilogy that I've written.
It makes me smile when I read The Thousand Injuries, because I think I know the Castle of Amontillado probably better than any of the stories, although I would say I'm more of a Black Cat guy myself. But it's great. And of course, Poe, and this has become a Poe podcast. Poe is also, as many are not aware of, he invented and kind of perfected the detective story. So kind of a cool thing. All right, so let's go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna shift gears a little bit. So go ahead if you're gonna say some more about Poe.
Well, I was just going to say I actually now need to read the entire complete works of Poe. So it's funny because I've been sort of, playing in it for the last few years now, but next thing I need to do is actually sit down and read the entire thing.
I can tell you which ones to skip, but there's some great there's some great ones. All right, so you mentioned iambic pentameter, and the thing that marvels me about this is it's hard enough to write a book. It's hard enough to write a Star Wars book because there's so many people that like it and so many expectations. Then you choose to write it in Shakespearean style. So those are three things that are very daunting. And then I'm reading the Merry Rise of Skywalker, and almost without fail, every line is 10 syllables long. And I think that is, there aren't enough superlatives to describe my enthusiasm for that. And again, this is the English teacher bias, but even like my wife, Deanna, who is not a Star Wars fan, but she appreciates good writing and she loves good literature. And I just had her read one of your pages, and she's just like, wow, that must have been so hard to do. And again, my cap to you, I'm going to get a cramp in my neck from tipping my cap to you during this interview, but tell us about that. I mean, I know this is nothing new for you, but it's still marvelous after all this time.
Well, I've always said that iambic pentameter gets easier the more you do it. I will say that with this book, I did. So, I mean, that I'm the sort of person who has all sorts of ridiculous sort of personal projects of my own that have no significance for anything else except my own amusement. Right. And last year in 2019, I decided to listen to everything in my iTunes library, which is like, it's like 3 days worth of music or whatever, or 10 days. I don't even know. It's a lot of stuff. But one of the things in there was the audiobook for William Shakespeare's Star Wars, my very first book. Mm-hmm. And I realized in re-listening to that I was much stricter about an even 10 syllables per line, as opposed to using an added 11th syllable, which is called a weak ending. I over the years grew sort of more comfortable with the weak ending because it's easier sometimes. It's sort of less to think about, honestly. If you can just sort of not have to end the line perfectly, but you can just go ahead and tack on an 11th syllable if you need to. So I decided that in writing The Merry Rise of Skywalker, I was going to once again be really rigid, I would say, about exact lines of iambic pentameter. And I think in the whole book, there's around 10 or a dozen maybe weak endings. But beyond that, everything is in really strict iambic pentameter. And that was just one of those things that I put on myself because I was like, I want to go back to it and see if I can do it again. And so it was fun to do.
A great challenge. Now, did you find yourself, when you would see a certain line of dialogue, did you find yourself saying, oh, how am I going to fit this into 10 syllables? I'm going to have to add 1 or 2 lines here just to make it work. Like, what did you find yourself kind of writing yourself into a wall, or did it just become very natural and organic?
You definitely write yourself into a corner. I mean, all the time, right? It's like, and that's true whether I'm trying to keep to 10 or whether I'm allowing myself that 11 syllable.
Right.
The nature of iambic pentameter is that you are trying so hard to get it into a line, and you finally just sort of give it up, and you're like, you know what? Let's just turn this into 2 lines or a line and a half, and then we'll add something else after it or something. So I've learned, I think, through the years to not try to force it too much. Sometimes if you can get a really nice, elegant 10-syllable line out of it, that's great. But otherwise, sometimes you just gotta push on into that next line to make it work.
Right. Oh, very good. Well, that, you know what? I kind of wondered that, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. I also, for people who have said to me, quite frequently. So why does Ian Doescher write in iambic pentameter? And did Shakespeare do that? Do all of his plays have 10 syllables per line? So how would you address that to everyone?
I would say that, so Shakespeare wrote in, I'm going to get my percentage wrong here. He wrote in iambic pentameter, I want to say, now you correct me if this is wrong, because I think he wrote in iambic pentameter about 70% of the time, and about 30% of what he wrote is in prose. But it actually might be flipped. It might be the other way around. It might be that doesn't sound right, though. That only 30% would be iambic. Anyway, iambic pentameter was the sort of meter of his day.
Yes.
And so it was primarily what he is writing in, especially in his earlier stuff. He is pretty strict with his iambic pentameter. Once he gets to something later, he's using a lot more prose. And that sort of thing. I didn't realize I'm in the middle of I'm just over halfway through now this thing I'm doing called the Shakespeare 2020 project, where me and a group of people around the world are reading through the complete works of Shakespeare. And I had forgotten how often Shakespeare also just has these kind of random scenes that pop up where people are rhyming each other's lines all the time. And I've sort of thought, it'd be really fun to do a Shakespearean adaptation where the entire thing rhymes, although it also might just get annoying. I don't know. But anyway, that's why I stick with the iambic pentameter. I certainly, if I were being more true to Shakespeare, I would use a lot more prose, and I would actually be not as rigid about my iambic pentameter. He broke the rules of it all the time. But because I am just a guy pretending to be Shakespeare, I sort of feel that the onus is on me to actually be more rigid about it, to say, hey, look, I can do this thing even after this many books.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is your one-stop shop for your vacation needs and your plans to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or the cruise lines. Travel looks much different now than it did a couple of months ago, and with the opening of Walt Disney World and soon, hopefully, the opening of Disneyland, you need a place to go where you can trust, and they will help you figure out and navigate all the different circumstances and guidelines that Disney has put out for you. And I can say that we had our vacation modified, and as soon as dates were announced, MEI contacted me directly to help me reschedule, which is exactly what I was hoping to do. So if you are interested in rescheduling your vacation or want to try to plan a Walt Disney World, Disneyland vacation, or anywhere else you want to go on the planet, be sure to contact MEI and Mouse Fan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Their signature service and expert advice will help you maximize your vacation time and dollar, and they will help you figure out all the different changes and modifications going on at the Disney theme parks. They are amazing, and I can tell you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the peace of mind that Becky Menken and the crew at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel have given me is invaluable. If you're interested at all, again, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Right, and boy, I mean, it shines. I mean, again, seriously, there is. It doesn't feel like a gimmick. It just feels like organic, natural storytelling. And when I'm reading it, you make it effortless. Like it just kind of is very melodic. I think Shakespeare would be proud. I mean, I'm certainly impressed by it, and you never cease to amaze me with these wonderful books, because they, of course, my friend, and again, I'm not just saying that because we're friends and because we're talking on the show. It's from the heart, because you've got two of my favorite things. You've got Star Wars and you've got Shakespeare, and again, Shakespeare, what he does better than anybody, in my opinion, is he understands the human condition, and that is why his characters and his plots and his plays are timeless. So you take that and you tell a Star Wars story. So I'm going to give you the names of these characters from the sequel trilogy, and I want to you to sort of share with us how you view these characters and their sort of inner conflict, because you've walked in their shoes through these three books. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. So let's start with Rey.
Well, for me, the primary thing with Rey is this search to understand who she is. and what her place is in the world. So what I've actually done with Rey, sort of the special speech thing that I gave her, was that when she has long speeches, each one of them is an acrostic, which means the first letter of the line. If you go down the first letter of each line of the speech, it spells out something. And so in the first, and those lines all happen to be an iambic pentameter, and all happen to be they rhyme with each other. So in the Force Doth Awaken, for example, she has seven speeches, and this is what it sort of spells out. It says, "Perchance I am some ancestor or child of him, the fabled Jedi Obi-Wan. I could be kin to Skywalker so mild, or mayhap child of Leia and her Han. 'Tis possible I by the Force was styled, or kin of other Jedi now far gone. My story is by mystery compiled." So to me, that gets at what her character is. It's just all about this sense for identity, and trying to find her place.
Beautiful. What a prescient line of text as well, huh?
Yeah, I haven't read it for a few years, but it does turn out to be, exactly, prescient.
I love it. Okay, that's great. This is fun. All right, let's do this. Let's do this with Finn, who, for my money, by the way, became less fully formed as the movies went on. So I always like seeing what you do with him.
Finn, I mean, I agree with that. I sort of wish there had been more and not less with Finn as the movies went on. But I think he wants family. You know, he's searching for St. Bende. I don't know if you know St. Or have spoken with her. She's done some of these like 5-minute stories, the parts of these Star Wars collections. But she talks. I was talking with her recently, and she was talking a lot about found family, and that's one of the reasons that she loves Star Wars so much. Is this notion of the family that you find, not necessarily the family you're born into, and that I think is what Finn's looking for. I guess I would say there's even this sense that he always sort of wished he had found that, or he was missing it in his life as a stormtrooper, and so in this new life, he is really looking for this sense of belonging with other people, which is why I think, I mean, that final moment of the Rise of Skywalker, where it's him and Poe and Rey all hugging each other tightly. I mean, that to me is like, that's the family right there.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree, and I'm glad you feel the same way. It just there's a lot of fertile ground there to sort of grow that idea of coming from a place in the First Order where you're nothing, and then meeting this surrogate family, and then just kind of growing into your own skin in a very unique way. And I think that's the importance of him, for sure. Yeah. So then let's talk about Poe Dameron, who, again, as the movies went on, I feel like I loved him in The Force Awakens. I thought he was very compelling in The Last Jedi, and then in The Rise of Skywalker, it almost felt like a very different character to me. How do you feel about Poe? What did you learn about him through writing him?
That's interesting. I mean, Poe, actually, his arc feels similar in some ways to Han Solo's, right? He's sort of just, the first thing you hear about him, right, is that he's the Resistance's best pilot, their hottest pilot.
Yeah.
And I think he sort of goes on this journey of maturity, where he learns to lead, and he learns to shut up, and he learns to, when to trust other people, and all of this. And I mean, I guess I sense that especially in The Last Jedi, but even as we get into The Rise of Skywalker, it's interesting. I mean, I'm going to now, after we talk, be thinking about what you said about he almost feels like a different character, in The Rise of Skywalker. But I guess for me, his journey is about sort of maturing into the person he's supposed to be.
I do like that, and I will gladly text you my dissertation on this as well.
Great. There you go.
Okay, so that's fascinating, and hopefully we can come to some middle ground. And again, this is what I always tell people: the beautiful thing about Star Wars conversation is that you may not always agree with the other person, but it's okay to disagree, not to be disagreeable. You have different beliefs and opinions of something, and you reach middle ground, and you both learn about the character in each other, which I think that is great and healthy, and that's definitely the thing we like to go for.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
what about Kylo Ren / Ben Solo?
I think okay. Let me collect my thoughts about him. Well, first of all, let me say from the outset, I did not love his character. In fact, I will just say I kind of just didn't like his character much in The Force Awakens, and maybe that's because I was expecting a new Darth Vader, and he gave us such a different thing.
Yes.
Then I began to like him even more in The Last Jedi, and then even more so in this book. So I'm sorry, this movie. You can tell I think of them as books.
No, I know. Yeah.
So I think I mean his journey is about. I mean, it's in some ways it's the Darth Vader journey, right? This dark to light, except that I don't think he was ever fully there. So he's another character. I mean, he's actually a lot like Rey in terms of trying to figure out who he is. But I think they come at it from very different places. Rey comes at it from this sense of abandonment and if I've been abandoned, well, then who am I and who do I belong to and all this sort of thing. Whereas he comes at it from sort of rejecting what he had been or had been expected to be or whatever. But then they're both searching for who they are. I will say I have because of my books, I have been introduced to the whole, like, at first with The Force Awakens, when I wrote that book, I was introduced to sort of the Finray crowd of people, and with this book, I am getting more of an education than I ever expected to get in the Reylo crowd of people, and I had no idea that there were people who were so adamant about these things, and people who are really upset that Ben Solo dies.
Yes. Yeah. I decided I rarely, and I mean, I think it's only happened once or twice in my history on Twitter, but I opened up the Reylo can and quickly shut it because Pandora's box was certainly opened.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's interesting. See, to me, Kylo Ren, I agree with you. Like, I think the design of Kylo Ren is almost perfection. I think he looks amazing. His lightsaber hilt is maybe one of my favorite. I like that the sound of his blade is almost growling and angry like he is, and I think that's fascinating. But I agree with you. He's the first two movies, I thought he was fine, but I would never have mentioned him as a top villain. Well, even though the design was great, I just felt like, well, what's this angst? What's this anger coming from? Where is it? I think Adam Driver's an amazing actor. And The Last Jedi, I think, is an exquisite film, my favorite of the sequel trilogy, in fact. But in The Rise of Skywalker, he became a great character. In fact, he was my favorite character in The Rise of Skywalker, and I never would have thought that. I certainly never would have thought I would have accepted his redemption, because I thought this was a little too formulaic, and it didn't seem plausible or probable, considering that he murdered his father. And it really wasn't until I read your book and Ray Carson's novelization of The Rise of Skywalker that I started to make peace with who Ben Solo / Kylo Ren is. It's someone who he doesn't like that his mom is, the famous General Leia, because there's a lot of weight there. That in and of itself would be daunting. His father is Han Solo, this, incredibly famous, smuggler / hero of the rebellion, who, by the way, is quite an absentee father, according to the literature after the movies.
Right.
And then his uncle is, of course, the most famous man in the history of the Star Wars galaxy and universe, Luke Skywalker. So we see this all the time in the real world with celebrities in Hollywood, where people can't live up to their parents' legacy. Imagine living up to those three. And so he instead decides to glom onto his grandfather, who was arguably one of the meanest evil characters in the history, constantly rejecting himself, fighting the light inside of him. Is that plausible per se? I mean, I don't know. This is a movie where you can hear explosions in space, so of course it's not plausible, but it is fun and it is compelling. So I guess I'm much more at peace with them than I ever was before, but it did take me a while to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's similar to the way I experienced him.
Yeah. And I also think to a degree that while there should be some ambiguity and some challenge and some intellectual honesty and critical thinking that happens when you ingest these films, I still feel like the audience shouldn't have to do all of the heavy lifting. And sometimes I think that it was a little bit lacking in some of this one. Not your book, but in the movie itself, which is, again, why I like your book so much, because it helped me to work out some things with the story.
I mean, it's nice when you don't have to fit. I don't have to fit into a certain time length. I mean, they didn't really either. They could have made the movie as long or as short as they wanted to. But, I'm able to. In fact, I sort of go into it knowing that I can put in more than what's in the movie, and that's part of what's expected of the books.
Yeah.
And so it just is a freedom to dig in more and help explain a few things. One of the things, I mean, you know this because we've texted back and forth about it, but one of the things that I didn't think the movie made clear enough was that the medal that Maz Kanata gives to Chewbacca at the end of the movie is Han's old medal.
Yeah.
Which I sort of thought it was, we're giving Chewie a medal because everybody feels like Chewie was robbed of his medal. Okay, that's fine. That's nice. But when you realize that it's Han's old medal, it makes a lot more sense. And that to me was not clear in the movie. Obviously, it was clear to smarter people like you. But it was one of those things that because I'm actually giving dialogue to Chewbacca, talking about some of his thoughts, I'm able to actually bring out and make it explicit for people who may not have realized it.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's true. I mean, again, that's part of it is how the story is told, and we could certainly go on and on about that in another podcast, and maybe we will. But I agree. The fact that it's Hans gives it pathos, and that's extremely important. And in fact, whenever you write Chewbacca, because I like getting his growls translated, because we all translate his and R2's and BB-8's beeps and whistles and growls and grunts, because in our mind we read the actors and the context of the scene and kind of put it together. So, but you actually got to bring it to life, which I think is really cool.
It was a lot of fun, and that particular speech where he talks about getting the medal.
Yes,
I'll just give away one of my Easter eggs there, which is that his little speech there is an acrostic that spells "Thank you, Peter," which was the little tribute to Peter Mayhew there, since he died either just before I don't remember when it was, just before the movie came out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I missed that, but that's great. I mean, that's one of the things that is always so fun. So let's just go into it now. You've done you've thrown in Snoop Dogg, you've thrown in Rick Astley, you've thrown in so many things. You've even put in I Trust in Zare acrostic from the Episode 2 book, which I don't know if I told you this or not, but the last time I was at Rancho Obi-Wan, Pablo Hidalgo was there, and I pointed that out to him, and he was pretty impressed. And it was a nice feather in my cap too. So thank you for that.
Well, it's my pleasure. You helped me. That scene that Dan is talking about is the scene between Count Dooku and Obi-Wan, where Dooku basically asks Obi-Wan to join him. And I was confused by that scene, and I either texted you or called you up or emailed you or whatever it was, and you sort of helped me understand why he would do that. So I threw in a little Dan for you, a little Dan moment.
It was great. So talk to us about, and thank you again for that. That was still one of my favorite moments. But speaking of favorite moments, as we mentioned, you're great about the Easter eggs and the acrostics and throwing some fun little things. So obviously there's a lot of mystery that you want us to unravel, but what can you share with us that we can find in this book that's fun Easter eggy stuff?
Well, there's all those sorts of little references thrown in here and there. I will say that one of the things that has become a little bit more restricted as the years have gone on is my ability to put in Easter eggs, partially because there's more of a sensitivity now about promoting other properties.
Sure, money.
Right. And so I do think there's still a Hamilton reference or two in there. The big one that I talk about in the afterword that I'll mention here. John Williams, of course, has a cameo in The Rise of Skywalker, and as a bartender who sort of silently watches, silently and sullenly watches the good guys walk by, and I wanted to give him a speech and do something to sort of honor John Williams and everything that he is. And so basically, to make a long story short, I gave him this speech where if you turn the speech on its side, the O's in the speech and the I's the dots above the I's, the O's become whole notes and half notes. The dotted I's become quarter notes, or eighth notes, and the speech then becomes sheet music for the Star Wars theme. Ba 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 ba. So that was something that was just a lot of fun to do. It took, obviously it takes work to do that kind of thing, but I felt like it was a fun way and a good sort of Easter eggy way to pay tribute to John Williams, whose scores make these movies what they are.
Yes. Well, when I read that afterward, I just thought that was when I think my wife said, "Did you just fall out of the bed?" Because I don't know how you came up with that. And obviously you understand language and music on a different level. And I mean, it is just amazing. Was Lucasfilm as impressed with that as I was? I mean, I was blown away.
I don't know. I actually don't know what their reaction was to it. I mean, I didn't get an email from them saying, "Wow, we love this," or anything like that. All I know is they let me do it, and so that's enough.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
As we begin to wrap up the show, I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-free, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be a part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk some Star Wars. I also want to thank all of my new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. I want to give a special shout out to our CWK Alliance members, Terrence King, Smooth Rivera, Dan Capurso, Aaron, Jim Tallman, JC Poe, Ed Kimoto, Greg McLaughlin, Robert Avila, Dustin Mills, Yancey Evans, Chelsea Sansbury, Connie Shee, Tyler Pompa, Hannah, Alex Procasio, Ian Thompson, David Nicely, Simbot Tetradarian, Christine Turk, Ross Halliban, Kurt McKellen, Dan Ream, Colby Mead, Alexander Moylan, Frank Mulder, Blake Weaver, Jim Capron, Chris Metz, LJ Souter, Aaron Harris, Chris Skavarka, Jeff Ellis, Daz Davies, Susan Gray, Thea Selby, Christian Dale, Brian McKinney, Jason Hall, Jared Cantor, Eric Struthers, Mark Suter, Angela Sauce, and Dennis Keithley. If you want to become a member of the CWK Alliance, go to www.cwkalliance.com and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you will also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Definitely let me know if you have any questions at all. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, live video, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR. There are also a lot of ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and check us out on Pinterest. You can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, and you can find my writing on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I'm an official blogger there, as well as on IGN, where I contribute articles on Star Wars, as well as other pop culture topics. And if you're considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and help you make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired. Don't be afraid to take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our CWK sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere you want to go on the planet. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like this show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word. Go to iTunes and search Coffee with Kenobi and you'll see the show there. My circle of friends has grown so much because of each and every one of you, and it means so much to me that we have such a wonderful Star Wars community.
It's enough that they let me do it.
That's right. That's actually kind of a big thing in and of itself. Well, Ian, it is fantastic to talk to you again, and I hope you won't be a stranger and still return to Coffee with Kenobi as often as possible, because we absolutely love talking with you and hearing you break down these Star Wars characters and this wonderful mythology.
Anytime, I would love to.
Awesome. Well, let everybody know where they can purchase the Merry Rise of Skywalker, which is available now, and again could not have a higher recommendation from me, so be sure to check it out. Let us know where we can find you and purchase your book.
So you can purchase the book through your local bookstore. They can order it for you, or through bigger places like Barnes & Noble and Amazon. I am on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Ian Doescher. And I also have a website, which is ianduscher.com. So I'm around.
Yes, you are. And then are you going to be doing any promoting or traveling for the book? I guess that might be harder to do these days.
It's funny, before coronavirus happened, I was going to have a very full schedule. I would have been in San Diego this past weekend for Comic-Con. Would have been at Celebration next month. And
that makes me so sad. We could have hung out.
I know. So no, I don't have any plans to be traveling right now because we can't do that. But I'll be doing sort of all the virtual events I can to help the book.
Very good. Well, we will certainly be promoting that. And again, thank you so much for coming on Coffee with Kenobi and for sharing your talents with the Star Wars universe and fandom. We are a better place because of you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Dan.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.